This is Derrick Broze. This is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance. I'm here in Standing Rock.
That man is wanted in 5 different countries: Chile, Argentina, Brazil.
We've been fighting a long time. We've all lost so very much. So many loved ones gone.
Don't you fucking tease that horse!
You are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. Above all, stay alive. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze with the Conscious Resistance Network, and tonight is episode 145 of the Conscious Resistance Live, titled Israel Claims Syria, Technocrats and Trump, and Joe Biden's Legacy. We'll be talking about that, plus discussing some latest information around the transgender science, so to speak, or so-called. And we're going to end the show with a little bit of positive news, some recent stories that you might not have heard about that are actually something to celebrate. And then we're going to end, as we always do, with a look at one of my books from my library. And then we're going to end completely with a new conscious music video. What we try to highlight every week here is investigative journalism, going beyond the corporate media and the mainstream alternative media, talking about the technocrat influence on both parties, including the incoming president, Donald Trump, that you won't hear on all the other sycophants and channels who have decided to give up unbiased, objective, investigative journalism in favor of supporting Donald Trump and the technocrats and Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and the list goes on. That's not what you're going to hear tonight here on the Conscious Resistance Live. We've been doing this for over a decade now. You can find us at theconsciousresistance.com. I would invite you guys all to check out our website and to bookmark it and to check it on a weekly basis. I try to do this show every Monday. It's been a few weeks. I've been taking a break off social media, and this is my second week getting back on it. So we're back at content creation. But nevertheless, you can find the all the links for tonight's show, and I have at least 30 or more. This is going to be a big info dump, deep dive tonight. So I hope you'll stick around for the next hour and a half, 2 hours. All the links will be added to tonight's post once we wrap up. You can find new interviews I did, including one with Amir Taki about the hijacking of Bitcoin and his lessons from the Syrian civil war, which is in fact pretty relevant because that's one of our major stories tonight. And he fought in the Syrian civil war a couple years back. You can see my recent talk at Monerotopia. You can see some walk-in talks I did and some of the post-election 2024 coverage I've done there. You can also find our documentaries, our books. You can find all of my public presentations I've been giving since 2013 to learn more about the philosophy and the ideas that we promote. All of that and much, much more is at theconsciousresistance.com. So thank you, everybody who has tuned in tonight. We are currently live on Twitter. We are live on Facebook. We're live on YouTube until they take us off. And we're, of course, live on Odyssey. We'll be posting on Rockfin, on BitChute, on, of course, Spotify. Thanks to everybody who always listens to the podcast version of this. Appreciate that. And yeah, feels good to be back. So as I said, we've got quite a bit of stories to get into tonight. We're going to just go ahead and dive into it. It's a lot, and there's quite a bit to get through. So I hope you will stick around. As always, let me just say this, preface this conversation before we get further. Take everything that I'm presenting and the sources that I'm presenting, look at the information itself. Don't prejudge a source and say, well, that comes from the mainstream, or that comes from this country, or that comes from this person and I don't like them. Look at the information that's presented, look at the facts, the data, and then make your own opinions formed there. Don't come in, or I encourage you, this is the best I can, to question authority, including myself, and think critically, but to leave your biases at the door and to leave your knee-jerk reactions at the door, and instead listen and tune in with an open mind. At least that is the kind of listeners that I'm calling in. So thanks again, everybody who's listening all over the different places. Let's go ahead and get into it. One more time, bookmark theconsciousresistance.com to get all of our content. So the big story this week is, of course, that Israel, we'll get to Israel in just a moment, but that Syria has fallen, at least in the sense of former president, dictator, depending on who you ask. Bashar al-Assad has left the country, reportedly still alive in Russia, and the country has now been taken over, freed, liberated, again, depending on your perspective, by a group which we're going to look at tonight, that some are calling a terrorist group, or at least, in the case of the U.S. government, used to call them a terrorist group. And others are saying are former jihadists who have now changed, turned over a new leaf and are potentially going to create beautiful things for Syria. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like as of today, that's where we're headed. Nevertheless, that is the information and the storyline that's being presented to us in the corporate media. So we're starting out looking at a CNN article with this individual who allegedly is leading the revolution. And I say allegedly just with that caveat of questioning everything. But the basic summary is this, which I found, and I think this sums it up nicely. Opposition groups in Syria seized the capital Damascus on Sunday after nearly 13 years of conflict, declaring an end to President Bashar Assad's government. The swift offensive, which was initiated on November 27th by a coalition led by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, which stands for the Organization for the Liberation of the Levant. So the swift offensive initiated by HTS on November 27th, along with various Turkish-backed factions, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and it's important to know who they are, the Southern Operations Room, and other armed groups quickly overwhelmed pro-government forces. So again, that's kind of the narrative that we're being told here, is that this is really people rising up again. This is an ongoing, this is the extension of what we've seen since 2012 and 2013. And we're going to start with looking at the current events. Then we're going to take some steps back and look at what has happened historically. And I'll share with you guys the reporting that I've done over the years, the folks at the Gray Zone, others who have continued to highlight the way the U.S. government, Israel, and the UK government have been trying to get into Syria for the longest time, with occupying parts of the country, trying to take control and interfere with the oil supply, bombings, claimed gas attacks, which are really false flags, and much more. But let's start here. Abu Muhammad al-Jalani is the militant leader of the main group leading the armed opposition. And again, this is HTS. And so just a couple days before the ousting of Assad happens, he gave this interview with CNN. Again, you can go through and watch that and listen to that, see what you think. The story about him, though, I think is the best versions I've seen, mainstream or otherwise, are coming from the New York Times and from the Financial Times. Again, take everything, with a grain of salt, but they do pretty good profiles on him here, at least what is publicly known and what they might want us to think. But nevertheless, if you want to learn a lot about his history, where he grew up, his family, being born in Saudi Arabia, but his family having been exiled from Syria and then going back later, the story, and in some ways, again, this guy's narrative, I'm not saying he's fake or anything like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if down the line we find out he's spent some time or met the CIA at one point or has some sort of intelligence connections, because to me, the storyline that we're being fed, and again, doesn't mean it can't be true, that he was radicalized post 9/11, that he was just a young boy and then watching the U.S. invade Iraq and then start killing people, really, radicalized him. So it doesn't mean that it can't be true. I probably think that is true for a lot of people. In fact, if I was in a country like Afghanistan or Syria, and I was watching the U.S. military come in and invade and take over and kill 1 million people and bomb and just destroy the nation, I might become radicalized. I could perfectly see how a young person living in the midst of that could become radicalized. So I'm not saying it's not potentially, that's not a potential, but nevertheless, that's part of the story. So again, all these links will be linked in this. Who is the leader of Syria's rebel offensive? It's al-Jalani. That you're going to hear that name more and more. Now, what we're being told is that he was leading the resistance, but he is not at the moment trying to claim himself as some dictator. There has been discussion of a transfer of power. Again, Assad left the country, went to Russia, but the former prime minister is now turning power over as of today, I believe, as I'm recording this on Tuesday, maybe late Monday, to a new interim prime minister. And basically, the story here is that, again, he was radicalized at one point. He was with al-Nusra Front, which is basically an offshoot of al-Qaeda, which are the people that we're told that attacked the United States on 9/11. Of course, al-Qaeda has had some interactions and funding and support from the CIA over the years, as well as the Islamic State in Syria, ISIS or ISIL, whatever you want to call them. And to be clear, when we talk about civil war, I was getting in a debate with somebody about this earlier. They were saying there's no such thing as a civil war. It never happened in Syria. Well, look, I get the idea that yes, there are people who have been tricked and deceived by the U.S. military and the U.S. government. Because the thing is, the U.S. government has had a plan to go into Syria for a long time, just like they had a plan for Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and it goes on, and eventually Iran. Now, General Wesley Clark talked about this years ago. The hit list that some people talk about of countries that the U.S. was going to eventually invade. And as I'll go in an article in a moment, you'll see that there's good arguments that this has been planned for quite some time. So yes, there is absolutely influence from Israel, from the UK intelligence, US intelligence, and we're going to talk more about Turkey as well. There are these outside forces trying to get rid of Assad. So in that way, you can say it's not a quote unquote genuine civil war, but that doesn't mean that everybody on the ground in Syria loved Assad and it was only the outside Western forces. It's a very complex situation. I am not an expert, don't claim to be an expert. But again, I would invite you to go check out my interview that I just released with Amir Taki, which you can find at theconsciousresistance.com, who did fight in the Syrian civil war for 2 years or whatever you want to call it. And he basically talked about his experience, not just, holding a gun and being in that part, but logistically organizing and being a part of this movement with the white PKK, I believe, the Kurds, and fighting in that resistance. And so it is a complicated situation. That's all I'm trying to say. Definitely there are people who wanted Assad gone, and that's true. But that doesn't mean that this is a genuine sort of ousting of Assad, as we're going to talk about in a moment. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that nobody wants this, right? Now, unfortunately, as of today, the reports we're already getting are that there have been some really horrible things already happening in Syria in the last 24 hours. So we're going to get into that and some more. But just a couple other reports I want to show you guys. This is from the Washington Institute. I found jihadi counterterrorism. This is basically more of a background look at the HTS. If you want to get some deeper background and really understand how they have interacted and worked with ISIS, and you can see here this section is titled "Early Relations Between HTS and the Islamic State." History of the Islamic State in the region. So this is if you want more of an academic look at this, but you want the real evidence that shows that these organizations, they were at one time allied. And then according to this, it says in April 2013 to February 2014, they were frenemies, and then they became outright enemies. And so they apparently are no longer, allied. But HTS itself under Jabani has, become more Jelani, they're claiming it has become more moderate. That's at least the story we're being told, is that Syria is now going to be run by a less jihadist, less extremist organization. But as of some of the videos that are going around on Twitter today, it appears that people in minorities like Christians and others are being killed and being assassinated and already. Here's from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Definitely a oftentimes a propaganda outlet. Still, nevertheless, they do like an academic background on who is HTS, terrorism background, or I'll include that as well if you want to learn more about that. And again, it says there's details here about the formation and the relationship with Al Qaeda. So this is an organization that this guy who talked on CNN just the other day, and who is now the leader of the Syrian rebel offensive that is handling the future of the country, has ties to Al Qaeda and to ISIS. Al Nusra Front was involved in all sorts of atrocities in the past. And the US government at one point even, I think, had a bounty on his head for millions of dollars. And now they're celebrating this as this is a free people coming together. Now, this next two I want to show you are from the Atlantic Council, which again is another part of the nonprofit industrial complex, oftentimes propaganda. But that's why it's important to study them and understand them, because the things that they share can give you some insight potentially and occasionally into where we're headed. This is December 8th. So just in the last 2 days, rebels have toppled the Assad regime. What's next for Syria, the Middle East, and the world? Experts react. And this is from Atlantic Council experts, right? Well, there's a section here. Hopefully I didn't just screw it up. Oh, I did. I had it highlighted. Let me find it real quick, guys. It was right in here. Okay, here we go. Talking about Israel and the region here. Sorry, I'm just got to find this. It's talking about how different nations were interested in making this happen. Here, let me just find this section real quick. I apologize, guys. Assad. So they're calling it a once-in-a-life opportunity. Okay, here we go. Said the long suffering of the Syrian people under a brutal regime that killed, tortured, dispossessed, and exiled millions of people has ended. Again, that's the mainstream perspective. The Iranian hegemonic project in Syria too has ended, and with it, Hezbollah's privileged position. While the future of Russian bases, the U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces in northeast Syria, interim governance, counter-terror activities, and Syria's new role may take months to shape, it's clear that Syria will be ruled by an opposition coalition with the support of the majority of Syrians. So that could be true on its own, on its own merits, but that doesn't mean there aren't other pieces of the puzzle going on here. The main region right here, it says, Assad's fall completely disrupts the influence of Iran and Hezbollah, which have heavily supported and depended on the Assad regime. It will also create sectarian tensions fueled by the regime's survival, reducing the risk of regional spillover conflicts. The U.S. should use this opportunity to coordinate a more firm regional policy towards Iran's activities. Moreover, a power vacuum in Syria could lead to regional instability and risk Syria becoming a field for regional competition over hegemony, potentially creating more chaos and empowering extremist groups if not appropriately managed. So they all knew that. These organizations that are involved, including Turkey and others, they knew that there's the potential for there to be chaos. Now, when we talk about Israel, this part right here, it says, the reality is that it was Israeli strikes in Lebanon over the last few months against a wide range of Hezbollah officials and weapon caches, and strikes in Syria preventing resupply to Hezbollah that weakened the group to the point that Syrian opposition forces felt confident they could take advantage and try to capture Aleppo. So what they're basically saying is, I'm going to pull up here in just a moment. Let me see if I got it right here. Israel's been doing airstrikes, and they're claiming that they're destroying weapon stockpiles. Whether or not that's true is a whole nother story. But what this Atlantic Council report is pointing out is that if it wasn't for Syria and some of the attacks it wasn't for Israel and some of the attacks that they've been waging on Syria in the name of preventing resupply to Hezbollah, then the Syrian opposition, who is backed by the U.S. and Israel and Turkey, wouldn't have had the opportunity to make the move that they've done. And we're already seeing, responses to that. So they continue here. Doing so required opposition forces to be confident that there wouldn't be reinforcements to the Assad regime from Hezbollah. While Israel may not have intended or planned for the Syrian opposition to take advantage and use the development to overthrow the regime, Israel would be wise to immediately leverage it as a point of commonality and use it to seek out a quiet, private engagement with emerging leaders. If Israel wants to better ensure its security in the north, it should reach private, serious agreements with the new Syrian government that the country won't be used to transfer weapons to Hezbollah. So it's like they're already making plans for how Israel should, take advantage of the situation. I thought it was interesting too how this report says, while it may not have intended or planned, I'm pretty sure they planned this and they knew exactly what they're doing. But it's funny how they just throw that in there as well. One other Atlantic Council report here: empower Syrians, not warlords, against the rebranding of HTS. This is from June 2021. So in 2021, somebody writing for the Atlantic Council, let's go back here and check out their bios. One is Dr. Rahif Al-Dougli, is a lecturer in the Middle East and North African Studies at Lancaster University in the UK. Dr. Azam Al-Kassir is a Syrian researcher based in London. So these two individuals, they wrote an essay on the Atlantic Council website saying, do not rebrand HTS from a terrorist organization to some legitimate organization. It says, quote, such questionable policy recommendations are usually justified by arguing that HTS, under the leadership of Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, who is the guy who just helped lead Syria, to topple Assad, is a viable negotiating partner that is willing and able to rein in a more dangerous global jihadist groups in Syria. As Syrian researchers rewrite this piece in response to analysis that seemed driven by either a humanitarian idealism or sheer geostrategic realism. Both standpoints appear to betray the hope of building a sustainable peace in a unified Syrian state. Current discussions about HTS and al-Jalani seem to suffer from a kind of cognitive convolution that sometimes appears when evaluating the label terrorist in relation to Western security needs. Surely, the experiences of local victims in Syria should be of some account in the definition of political terror. And they go on here to describe describe just the different actions taken by HTS with al-Jawlani. And I do think that's interesting how they're calling out and saying, like, you know, how about the people in Syria who might suffer if this terrorist organization is no longer labeled terrorist and is allowed to be, you know, seen as moderate and kind of paraded around, and now given the, you know, go ahead to get, you know, to take over Syria. Because we know that the US government only approves of things like this when it's an organization or individuals that it believes it can manipulate and shape and bend to their will to serve so-called US national security interests or national, you know, Western national interests. So they go through here and they talk about some of the ways that he has been a violent, dangerous person. Al-Jawlani, who is leading this transformation, might abruptly decide to make another shift in a not so favorable direction if he is not satisfied in the future for any reason. And it says, hasty cooperation with the group will give the group time to establish dominance over Idlib. And he has long combined conflicting messages of benevolence and violent intolerance. Despite the recent effort to rebrand HTS, this does not depart from the trend. For example, al-Jawlani's recent denials of any sectarian violence on the part of HTS or its precursor, al-Nusra Front, bring to mind al-Jawlani's interview with Al Jazeera in 2015, in which he kindly stated that the members of the Alawite minority would not be killed under his rule so long as they abandoned their support for Assad and their doctrinal religious beliefs. There is no dearth of such rhetoric throughout his rise to power. For us, the Alawites are a sect that deviated from the religion of God according to the rulings of the jurists and the people of the knowledge. For the Druze, they are subject to our dawah activities. For example, they have graves they visit, and Islam considers this idolatry, so we ended that. So he's just going on and just saying how, like, yeah, everybody's going to be cool as long as they submit to whatever we say. So it's not like this is about to be some bastion of free speech and diversity and things like that, like the Western media might be trying to portray it. Another one that I found here, this is coming from the Washington Institute. I thought the title was interesting. I encourage you to read it. How Syria's so-called diversity-friendly jihadists plan on building a state. And they just go into some of the history and some of the things that he's, you know, how he's attempted, Jawlani has attempted to improve his image and sort of transform himself in front of the media, probably in the interest of moving towards the place where he is now, where he has some level of power. Now, the next thing I want to bring you guys to, again, all of the show notes, everything I'm going over is going to be found at theconsciousresistance.com. The next thing I want to highlight here, I'll check some comments in a moment, is that this is a new article from Don Villa, who is a contributor to the Conscious Resistance Network, and he did a great job, I think, here of just breaking down this whole situation. I'm sort of describing it right now and going over this idea. We are going to talk about the Greater Israel Project in just a moment. But Don Villa, if you want just like an article, I'd say reasonably short. He originally wrote this for the Free Thought Project, and then he reblogged it over at our site. With the fall of Damascus, Western war hawks jump for joy. And a lot of what I've just covered, he does go over some of the history of who HTS was and Jawlani and describe sort of the latest of what happened. Here's that poster I was telling you about, Muhammad al-Jawlani. The up to $10 million reward, stop this terrorist, is, you know, that was what they were saying at the time, Department of Justice. And of course, we're going to get into in just a moment how Israel and Turkey are involved. And Don covers that here. He says, in the wake of the coup, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also publicly praised the jihadist militants, hailing the takeover as a, quote, historic day for the Middle East, and personally taking credit for their ability to seize control of Damascus so quickly. This significance of the power shift in the region was also elaborated by Murad Sadghiasad, president of the Middle East Studies Center in Moscow. He said, quote, the fall of Damascus is a turning point in the Middle Eastern politics, signaling not only the collapse of Assad's rule, but also a significant weakening of Iran, which had spent years building its influence through its alliance with Syria. Tehran had regarded Syria as a vital link in the axis of resistance, encompassing Lebanon, Yemen, and Palestinian groups. Syria served as a crucial logistical hub for arming Hezbollah and providing both political and economic support. However, the collapse of the Syrian capital and the ensuing chaos shattered these supply chains. Capitalizing on the situation, Israel deployed forces into the buffer zone on the Golan Heights, as we're going to talk about in a moment, effectively expanding its occupied territory. This move not only bolstered Israel's strategic position, but also deprived Iran of the ability to counteract its actions effectively in the region. So there's much bigger plays, and unfortunately, the Syrian people are the ones who will suffer in the end. You know, I was just, again, debating somebody on Twitter. I know the best use of my time. And this guy was, again, just sort of coming from the conspiracy theorist perspective, which, guys, look, I'm right there with you. We got to talk about the ISIS funding. We got being funded by the U.S., the U.S. government, the military, the CIA, the training of moderate rebels, all these things that I've been covering since 2015, at least. I went back actually the other day and posted every single report on the Syrian civil war, the false flag that we've done at the Conscious Resistance, everything from interviews to articles to video reports. And there's at least 30 of them that we've been covering and following this story. It's important to look at who's funding who and what are the bigger pictures at play. You know, I have friends who are from Israel and friends who are, near Syria and Turkey and in that region. And I don't claim to be an expert. I also think that they have their own perspective. From their perspective, they just want peace. They might not be able to fully fathom and understand, well, look, the U.S. government, I know you don't like Assad, but they're not your buddies. They're not coming in there to try to save you or do something good. They have their own interests, and you need to be able to look out for that, right? So we can sometimes maybe get trapped into a conspiratorial research angle or perspective. Some people do. And then you forget that there are regular people that are actually just existing and trying to survive. And those regular people, they might hate Assad for one reason, and they might say, oh my God, yes, the U.S. is coming to save us, and believe that, even if in the end we know it's not going to end up that way. And vice versa. There might be some people who hate Assad and who are celebrating right now, or at least were celebrating in the last 24, 48 hours, and are sort of hopefully optimistic that things won't turn out as crazy as they have been. As I said earlier, there's already been reports of mass killings of religious minorities in different parts of the country. There's also been reports. I don't even need to really show you guys the video, but again, my friend, I will say thank you for sending me, Ram, thank you for sending me some videos. I mean, I could put them on screen, but I think you guys have probably seen enough dead people and dead babies over the last year or so. But rest assured, it's not just Israel. We're going to talk about Turkey. Turkey, as of just the 10th, they targeted a village of Jeddah, west of Kobani, resulting in the I'm reading from a report here on Telegram, the martyrdom of 2 civilians, one 25 years old and one 12 years old, and 2 other children, 10 years old and 8 years old, were injured. So Turkish attacks on Syrians within Syria, they have been going on since before this latest thing that we're seeing here. The whole region is just out of control and it's fucked up. So, I just want to say that, it's not as, I think, simple as we might like to be. It just only look at things from the conspiratorial perspective. This is why I've been ranting and raving, saying for a while that it's important to consider these complex topics from multiple perspectives. That's why I look at the Atlantic Council. I look at the Washington Institute and the Center for International Studies, as well as mainstream reports. And then I look at independent reports like those of Don Villa. And then I use social media to follow people who are actually living in these countries and see what they're up to, what they're talking about, what they're witnessing. So that's what we're doing here tonight. We're going to go into a little bit more here in the Syria situation. Thank you guys for being here for the 145th episode of the Conscious Resistance Live. I encourage you to read this whole article from Don Villa, Why the Fall of Damascus, with the fall of Damascus, Western war hawks jump for joy. And you can hear more about how Israel's celebrating and other folks. And you talk about Wesley Clark's plan here. And this, maybe we'll just end here. He's talking about Wesley Clark. This is what I alluded to earlier, that in 2007, former U.S. Army General Wesley Clark said that there had been a plan to go after 7 nations in 5 years: Iraq, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Lebanon, and finally Iran. It's taken much longer than 5 years, but let's look at where we're at. Iraq has been destroyed. Sudan has been completely fractured, ravaged by civil war, and facing the world's worst humanitarian hunger crisis. Libya is a failed state, turned into a hub for terrorism and open-air slave trading, following the U.S. NATO-led assassination of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Similarly, Somalia has all but collapsed, a haven for piracy and CIA-backed terrorists. And now it appears Syria is on the way to being gone. And again, I don't want to oversimplify, because there are still good people there in Syria. There are still resistance movements. There are anarchists. There are freedom-minded people that are against the Turkish, the US, and the Assad and the ISIS influence. And these people are just desperate for a little bit of liberty. And it's really sad that there are children and people being raised in that environment and having to do that. I know that Syria is a beautiful place with so much history, so much of humanity's history in that beautiful piece of land. And if we go even further back, as Amir Taki told me in the recent interview, and you look at the founding of the current state of Syria, it was actually carved up by the United Kingdom, by the British royalty. And that created its own issues because it sort of cut right into these tribal ethnic groups that had their own connections to each other. And all of a sudden now they're citizens of different nations. So the whole thing has been screwed up for a long time. And this is what you get when you get government, when you get colonizing and colonialism, and these people trying to tell us how to live our lives and control the future of humanity. So I highly encourage you to read this full article from Don Villa. Check it out. Next one here, as I mentioned, Turkey has been involved in this offensive. This is being reported by Middle East Eye. Turkey's Erdogan backs rebel offensive in Syria. This was a couple of days before they claimed Damascus. Turkish President Erdogan appeared to back a rebel offensive in Syria that has captured several major cities within a week, as indicated by a statement he made on Friday. They said Idlib, Hama, Homs, and of course the ultimate target is Damascus. The opposition march continues, and our hope is that this march in Syria proceeds without any incidents or trouble. He reminded that he had previously invited Syrian President Bashar al-Assad multiple times this year for talks to, quote, determine Syria's future together, but Assad did not respond positively to such a meeting. Although Turkey did not directly intervene in the latest offensive by the rebels, it appears to have given the operation a green light. Turkish security sources told Middle East Eye last week that Turkey had approved a limited operation in the Aleppo countryside. However, the unexpected collapse of Syrian government forces has expanded the operation into uncharted territory. Some elements of the Turkey-backed Syrian National Army joined the initial Aleppo offensive, led by HTS, the former al-Qaeda affiliate that we've been discussing already. So Turkey clearly involved in benefiting from this situation. Also, I want to point out this article I found from 2022 that was reported. What was the outlet? I can't see the name right here, but the article was titled Syrian Foreign Minister Mekdad Calls for New World Order. And he said that Western powers wanted Syria to change their Israel policy or to face consequences. Now, this is pretty interesting in light of everything we're seeing now. This is from the foreign minister of Syria at the time in 2022. He said, at the United Nations, where I served as Syrian ambassador for 11 years, the Western countries said that we would change our policy towards Israel or face the consequences. He said, revealing the Assad government's confrontationalist policy towards Israel played a role behind the prolonged conflict in Syria. Arguing for a new world system, the Syrian minister said that illegal intervention in the sovereign affairs of developing countries should not be tolerated. And then there's another piece here. This is, again, what I'm talking about when you really understand what the Western forces have been doing to Syria to get it to this point where they could just walk in and take over. He said, quote, we can't import wheat and we can't grow sufficient food as the U.S. is occupying northeastern parts of Syria. Our oil wells are in northeast Syria, and the Americans are selling oil from that area to Turkey and separatist groups. He said, accusing Turkey of supporting forces that target Syria. He cautioned that the groups that target Syria could also later target Turkey. So this whole thing, again, the U.S. comes in, they're occupying parts of the country, they're bombing people, killing people, they're taking their own oil and using it to fund separatist forces that they're trying to use to overthrow the current government. Again, doesn't mean Assad's a hero or anything like that. But to my friends, like I had one of my friends tell me that he thinks that it's a good thing that Trump bombed Soleimani, the Iranian general, a couple of years ago, just as an example. And I was explaining to him, like, look, maybe this is a different concept for you. But in the U.S., there's supposed to be the semblance, at least, of something called the Constitution. And so they're supposed to have limits on power. The U.S. government isn't just supposed to be able to go bomb and assassinate people in other countries. That's a sovereign nation. We might not like what happens in that country. We might say, hey, I don't like what's going on in Iran. But that doesn't give the U.S. president the authority under the Constitution. And I'm not a hardcore constitutionalist, but for people who are conservatives or whatever and claim to care about, the founding documents of the America, follow your own documents then. And those documents don't say the president is a dictator that can just bomb and attack anybody all over the world if it's terrorism or if it's COVID or whatever other excuses they want to come up with. And I was trying to explain this to my friend who was saying, but don't you see that was a good thing? Many of us over here, we celebrate that Trump killed that guy because he was a bad man and he actually attacked Americans. And I said, that may be so, but don't you see how it's setting a slippery slope, a really bad precedent to say that the U.S. government should just be allowed to continue to be the policeman of the world and bombing and killing people in random countries simply because we say they did something bad. That's the same justification that gets the U.S. Government and military to go after journalists like Julian Assange, who's not even an American, and try to take him from the UK and then bring him to the US for trial and things like that. Or, for example, Roger Ver, who is a friend and who's currently facing basically a lifetime in prison, who was arrested in Spain. This guy actually renounced his US citizenship, paid his taxes, did all the things he had to do to say, bye, I'm no longer a U.S. citizen, got citizenship in another place, and was vacationing in Spain when the U.S. government, through Interpol, came after him and is now trying to extradite him back to the U.S. from Spain when he's no longer even a U.S. citizen. Do you see the connection here? It's like you give the government and the state this ability to say, well, we think bad things are happening in this other part of the world, so we're going to go intervene. We're going to drone bomb people there. We're going to kill people. We're going to arrest. We can hunt you down wherever in the world. And unfortunately, they have the technology, as we're going to talk about in the second half of the show. But it's a bad precedent, my friend. So even if some people in Syria, I feel for you and I care for you and I stand in solidarity with you, fight and resist and push back against the state and against all tyranny and all oppressors, no matter who they are. But the U.S. government doesn't need to fund your war, doesn't need to fund your battle, doesn't need to come intervene. That is just, I mean, maybe there's a certain point, right? People will bring up, real atrocities and genocides that have happened. Like, for example, in Gaza, at the very least, we should not have been involved in the first place. The U.S. government should not be involved in the Middle East, and U.S. taxpayers should not be funding these conflicts. That's my major thing, right? Is I want all the wars and all the violence to end, but at the very least, free people should not be extorted through taxation to have their money taken from their pockets and then used to go kill babies in other countries and to fund wars and proxy wars and things like that. So let's go ahead and continue. We got a few more points to make here on this Syria angle. Thank you guys again for being here tonight. All right, so this one I shared earlier. Israel says its airstrikes destroyed most of Syria's strategic weapons stockpiles. So they bring in these resistance groups funded by the U.S. intelligence, funded by Turkey, funded by Israel. They come in, they storm in, basically with very little resistance. Assad leaves, and then all of a sudden Israel starts bombing the crap out of different aspects of their military, just totally destroying their aircraft, their naval ships, missiles, infrastructure. They're claiming that they're destroying chemical weapons supplies, and I don't know, maybe Assad did have chemical weapons, but as far as the alleged chemical gas attacks in 2013 and 2018, there's no hard evidence he did those. So I would imagine if they claim they found, chemical weapons, it's just going to be a false flag designed to justify more, U.S. hegemony. Middle East Monitor says Israel occupies buffer zone in Syria's Golan Heights. This is what I was talking about a moment ago. So Israel comes in, they start bombing what's left of Syria's military, so they have no chance to defend themselves now. Basically, this is like kicking somebody while they're down, like really hard, kicking them again over and over and over while they're down. And then they come in and they occupy the Golan Heights, which is a UN-supervised, demilitarized buffer zone between Syria and, which is part of Syria between Israel. Well, Israel's coming in now and claiming it, saying, like, this is our own. Netanyahu said the collapse of a UN-monitored disengagement agreement is now over. Basically, he said, since Syria is no longer in power, this buffer zone is no longer relevant. The Israeli army took control of the mountain summit of Mount Hermon on the Syrian side of the border and several other locations. The army also mounted dozens of airstrikes, as I just covered here. So they're not wasting any time. They're getting straight to a plan that is called Greater Israel. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Real quick, I just wanted to mention, I've had this in my reports for a while. Dan Cohen did this one a while back, October 21st. Uncaptured media over on Substack. U.S. authorizes CIA mercenaries to run biometric concentration camps in Gaza Strip. This is probably the future for Syria and for anywhere else that Israel comes or the U.S. comes to liberate. private intelligence corporation billed as Uber for war zones is preparing to create what Israel hopes will be the model for supplanting Hamas rule in Gaza. And I would say even further than just Gaza, but it's this 1,000 CIA-trained private mercenaries as part of a U.S.-Israeli plan to turn Gaza into a high-tech dystopia, and they're using this technology. This plan is to get all the residents to use biometrics to enter and exit this area under a CIA contractor's control. It's basically going to be internment camps with biometrics where they're not allowed to leave. And you can learn all about that in there. I just think that's an important part for people to understand. You know, it's not just the bombing and the killing that Israel does. When they're done, they come in and take over, and they're trying to put the Palestinians, and I would imagine the Syrians who are in the areas they're occupying now, either kill them or put them in these internment camps. And I know that's may sound rough to some people, but I'm sorry, that's the reality. These next couple ones here are about the so-called Greater Israel Project, which I encourage you to learn more about. Each of these 3 articles I'm sharing here can give you some more insight into that, including what is known as the 1982 Yinon Plan. And it says, the ongoing geopolitical shifts in the Middle East, influenced by Israel's military actions, the death of Iran's supreme leader, and evolving alliances reflect a long-standing strategy for regional dominance, often associated with the 1982 Yinon Plan. The vision seeks to fragment neighboring states and secure Israeli supremacy with events like the Arab Spring, the Abraham Accords, and the rise of new power blocs. So it goes through here in like a timeline and sort of the plan of what this Greater Israel Plan outlined. It said fragmenting neighbor states like Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. They were identified as targets for division along sectarian and ethnic lines, ensuring that they could not challenge Israel's supremacy. Territorial expansion, the vision of a Greater Israel extended to the Euphrates River in the east and the Sinai Peninsula in the south, aligning with biblical territorial aspirations. It seems like someone's trying to recreate the Bible over here. Weakened opposition, a fragmented Arab world would reduce the collective ability of states to oppose Israeli policies, creating a more favorable strategic environment. Excuse me. There's another one here. This is also about this. Israel chasing historical Zionist aim of occupying southern Lebanon, wider region. Expert says if Hezbollah loses in South Lebanon, then you're going to have this Greater Israel Project kind of moving forward. That's one perspective. Another one, just a couple of days, actually this is 2 months ago, but they could already see what was happening. Netanyahu revives the Greater Israel Plan. And the same thing, just talking about the efforts to establish Israeli dominance and break up the nations near them and essentially occupy and take over them in the sense of Syria and Iraq and other places around there, Lebanon. And it seems like they're having some success. Now, I found this article as well. This is another reason many people have pointed out the conflict. When you look at a certain pipeline that some people want to make from Turkey going on through Syria, back in 2016, look at this, an old Robert Kennedy Jr. in 2016 writing for EcoWatch. This is before he went Trumper and was more on the left-leaning guy. Syria, another pipeline war. And it's talking about that, about pipelines. And of course, he's talking about climate change. It talks about Turkey's involvement here. Of course, let me see if back then, if he was willing to question Israel. Israel also was understandably determined to derail the Islamic pipeline because it would enrich Iran and Syria and presumably strengthen their proxies. So anyways, the point is here is that you could see that people have been talking about this for a while, that this pipeline, here's that picture actually, I think you might have seen going around. Where was it at? Yeah, can you guys see that? There's a picture on the screen for those who are watching showing Saudi Arabia in the south and Qatar, and then a pipeline cutting across there, hitting through Jordan, going up north through Syria, up into Turkey, and how Israel would be against this, as well as other people, for different reasons, different geopolitical reasons. But the point is, it's been happening. This plan has been in the works for quite some time. So far now that even I've been reporting on this for, like I said earlier, 2015, for over almost a decade now. If you go to theconsciousresistance.com and just search Syria, we have an entire section on our website dedicated to the Syria false flag, the geopolitical aspects. This was my number 2 most important story in 2019, the truth about Syria and the fake gas attacks. All of this is important. Going back to 2018, you can see I questioned John Kerry that year, and on and on and on. So I want to invite you guys to really spend some time. as I said, every link I'm covering, I will be sharing after we're done here. But if you want to check theconsciousresistance.com, you can already kind of dive in and see a bit about what we've been reporting on over the years. And in fact, I want to show you a brief clip here from my Pyramid of Power documentary series. For those who know that I produce a 17-part documentary series, which, by the way, we've released 15 episodes so far. I just finished writing and recording the narration for Chapter 16, Religion and Secret Societies. That one is currently in the hands of my editor. He's working on it now. It's going to be released in mid-January. And then in March 2025, we're going to release the final episode, Chapter 17, Who or What is at the top of the Pyramid of Power. And that's going to feature G. Edward Griffin, Richard Grove, James Corbett, David Icke, Daniel Eshelen, Adam Green, Mark Passio, James Corbett. There's a number of other people that I'm forgetting right now. Peter Dale Scott, so many others that are in this documentary. You can find it at thepyramidofpower.net. And well, we released Chapter 14 a couple months ago about false flag events, and I detailed some of the false flag, the facts that we know about the false flag relating to the claims of gas attacks in Syria. And it's important to understand this history, because if you just started paying attention to Syria in the last week because it's trending right now and everybody's talking about it, I totally get that. But it's important to understand the back history that goes back at least a decade. And then really, if you want to be a nerd, go back to the creation of the state of Syria itself. Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but having a deeper analysis of these things instead of just shouting conspiracies might be more useful. So check out this quick clip. This is again from Chapter 14 of the Pyramid of Power documentary series about false flags, and our section on the claimed Syrian gas attacks, which the U.S. Military and the Western media said was done by Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and they tried to use this as justification to go invade him. And it was under these claimed gas attacks that Donald Trump actually bombed Syria, because he bought in and promoted the false flag story. But check this out real quick. Discrepancies in the story of the Syrian gas attacks don't end there. In May 2019, the Working Group on Syria, Propaganda and Media published a document signed by a man named Ian Henderson, an expert inspector with the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, the OPCW, as far back as 1998 and as recently as 2018. The report concludes, quote, "The dimensions, characteristics, and appearance of the cylinders and surrounding scene of the incidents were inconsistent with what would have been expected in the case of either cylinder being delivered from an aircraft. Instead, they believed a manual placement of the cylinders in the locations investigators found them is, quote, the only plausible explanation for observations at the scene." In November 2019, WikiLeaks began releasing leaked documents from the OPCW, including publishing an internal email written by a member of the OPCW fact-finding mission to Syria. The documents make clear that the OPCW report, published in July 2018, which found Assad was responsible for the attacks, was shaped to conform with the public allegations made by the US, UK, and France. British Mail on Sunday columnist Peter Hitchens reported on the OPCW emails, noting that the doctoring of the OPCW fact-finders report, quote, appears to be the worst instance of sexing up in support of war since the invasion of Iraq and Tony Blair's doctored dossiers. The emails show an OPCW investigator contacting OPCW Chief of Cabinet Robert Fairweather and his deputy, Amer Shouket, on June 22, 2018, to raise grave concern about the details that had been excluded from or changed in the soon-to-be-published redacted report on the agency's investigation into the alleged gas attacks. He wrote that the redacted report had strayed so far from the evidence collected that it, quote, no longer reflects the work of the team. The email highlights statements that misrepresent the evidence collected in the on-the-spot investigation, including the assertion that the team had found, quote, sufficient evidence at the time to determine that chlorine or another reactive chlorine-containing chemical was likely released from cylinders. Another claim in the official report, that high levels of chlorinate organic derivatives were detected at the site of the alleged attack, was also false. According to the investigator, these chemicals were found in trace amounts as low as 1 to 2 parts per billion. So again, that was from the Pyramid of Power documentary series. You can find it at thepyramidofpower.net. And overall, as we conclude this segment of tonight's show, talking about the latest developments in Syria, and I will continue to report on them as things proceed, it's important it's important to know that that you're not being told the full story. At the very least, you can know that. Now, we should keep an eye on what's going on, because what happens in the Middle East, with the fact that we have crazy people who are trying to bring the Bible to life and who believe in biblical prophecy, we should keep an eye on it, because not only because it matters if the Syrian people suffer, if the Turkish people suffer, if the Palestinians and the Israeli people suffer, if all of the people suffer under the hands of psychopathic predators in criminal governments, it does matter. But it does impact the Western world as well, what happens over there. And overall, it's important to question these things because, well, we're being lied to. And when we're lied to, we aren't being shown the truth. We're being shown deception. And it's important to push past that deception if we're ever going to have a true understanding of the world. Otherwise, your emotions, your heartstrings will be tugged as they show you pictures of dead babies and dead kids used for a particular cause. Instead, we owe it to those people who have died in these conflicts and who are suffering right now, what's going on in Syria and the potential for this new regime to be pretty autocratic and very unfriendly to other religions and minorities. There is a grave potential for things to get bad. And it does matter, I think, just on a human sense, but in the terms of those of us who are fighting for truth and fighting for justice, to expose the lies that are being shoved in front of us. They're trying to rebrand criminals who've been associated with other criminals who've been told for 2 decades, Al-Qaeda and now ISIS, that are dangerous, violent people. They're trying to rebrand those people and to say, now those are good people that you should trust. And this is what's going to be best for the Syrian government. Pay no attention to what the Israeli government does over here. Pay no attention to what the Turkish government has going on here or what the US government is trying to foment. But I think we should instead remember the warning of General Wesley Clark about the attempts to disrupt these 7 nations over a certain period of time in the post 9/11 world. And unfortunately, that's where we're at now. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. We're going to talk next about the Technocratic Trump cabinet. You're not going to want to miss this one, guys. Stay tuned.
Are you using your phone, or is it using you? Rise above mass surveillance and discover a phone that protects your privacy and communications.
Above Phone does everything your old phone does, without tracking you, while giving you complete control over your phone and apps. We are better than big tech. It works with any cell service. No forced logins. No advertising or tracking. Download apps privately. Control your phone and its apps with secure hardware. Introducing Above Suite. Protects your internet traffic. Private email on any device. Video call with friends privately. Encrypted chat, calls, and internet phone. Protect your searches and get results. Don't worry if you're new. Every phone includes a free 45-minute live call. You also get free email and chat support, free guides and video courses. We can take back our technology. We're here to help with tools and education. You have the power.
Rise above with Above Phone.
AbovePhone.com.
Above Phone is one of our partner organizations. My buddy Hakeem Anwar with Above Phone, AbovePhone.com. You can also go to our website. You can check out the advertisement there. And if you click through there, you do support our show. So thanks to everybody who does that. Now, we're going to talk about Trump's cabinet. I mentioned earlier, I took a social media break for about 3 weeks, and that was a couple days after the election. It was just a good time for me to take some time off. So I haven't been reporting too much in the last few weeks on this. I haven't done a live show since the election. I did one the day before telling you guys not to vote. And as I reported recently, guess what? The non-voters won. More people chose not to vote than voted for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, even if you believe their garbage numbers. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about reality. Look, the fact is Donald Trump is going to be the next president, and within just over 30, 40 days or so. And there's a lot of kind of tension and uncertainty about what he's going to do and how many promises he's going to break and how much of a tyrant he'll be, or will he really make America great or something like that. I think we can all sort of see what's happening, but nevertheless, I haven't been on to report about that. So we're going to be talking all about that tonight, I've got a good amount of links open available here that we're about to go through, and giving you the real information about why you shouldn't trust Donald Trump's incoming cabinet, and not just, people who hate Trump because whatever sort of nonsense they've heard, but legitimate reasons. And namely, as I've pointed out several times in the last year or so, as it's become apparent it was happening, that the technocrats have lined up behind Donald Trump. Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, even Alex Karp at Palantir, who backed Kamala Harris. He seems to be getting, embracing Trump now, and others. And this is not by mistake. This is by design. And we're going to talk about this tonight as we go through and show you the many different reasons that Elon Musk is partnering with Donald Trump and Peter Thiel and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get into this. First, let's start with the mainstream look at things. This is coming from Fareed Zakaria, who I guess he's a contributor to the Washington Post occasionally, and he used to work, or maybe still does work, for CNN. And he wrote here, the Democrats' three big mistakes. They mishandled immigration, identity politics, and the pileup of Trump's prosecutions. And so he's kind of saying, this guy's no Trump supporter, but I just thought it was interesting just to start with how even if you just take the most mainstream level of version of events, which I don't personally, but even if you look at that level, that the so-called left, the progressives, the Democrats, they increasingly went further and further left and really alienated a lot of so-called middle America and just regular people who aren't really hardcore on gender ideology or don't, blindly just want to let anybody in the country. It doesn't mean they're racist or they're hateful people, but when they hear stories about immigrants being allowed into the country after committing murders and then getting arrested, and then in liberal progressive cities, the judges letting them out without bail or with little to no bail, and then they get to go out and kill other people or commit more crimes. Those sort of things really caused a lot of people to wake up, and many of them unfortunately went towards Trump. Now, back in the conspiratorial mindset, if I put my tinfoil hat back on, I would say, and as I have been saying for the last 8 years, this is all done by design. The whole goal was to create this false anti-establishment hero in the form of Donald Trump. They want the left to get as extreme and crazy as possible so that people have this reaction we're describing here. And then what does it do? It drives them to the other side because so many people are stuck within this false dichotomy, this false binary. And so I think that this has all been done by design. But nevertheless, let's look at what Zakaria said here. He said the first big error was the Biden administration's blindness to the collapse of the immigration system and the chaos at the border. An asylum system that was meant for a small number of persecuted individuals was being used by millions to gain legal entry. Instead of shutting it down, liberals branded anyone protesting as heartless and racist. They missed a massive shift in the American public opinion in just a few years. In 2020, the percentage of Americans who wanted to decrease immigration was 28%, but by this year it was 55%. And then they talk about how Kamala Harris went on The View and they said, would you have done anything different than Biden? She said no. And she should have said, I would have shut down the border early and hard, and basically saying, she missed out. And then he also says they got a bit overzealous with trying to go after Trump and really, lawfare. It says lawfare turned Trump from a loser to a victim. And as his list of indictments grew, his campaign contributions increased and his poll numbers solidified. And this other one I think is important too, the dominance of identity politics on the left, which made Democrats push for all kinds of diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, or DEI, that largely came out of the urban academic bubble, but alienated many mainstream people. There is an irony in claiming to be pro-Latino by insisting that people use the term Latinx, which I've never used. I don't know anybody who does actually use it. It is just like they said, it's like this left-wing progressive academic bubbles who try to push these trends on people. And it says only to discover that Latinos themselves think the word is kind of weird. This kind of obsession made Democrats view people too much through their ethnic or racial or gender identity. And it made them miss, for example, that working class Latinos were moving forward towards Trump because they were socially conservative or liked his macho rhetoric or even agreed with his hardline stance on immigration. One of Trump's most effective ads ended with the tagline, Kamala is for they, them. Trump is for you. Pretty good. But nevertheless, I think that there is some truth there that the mainstream, if you're just looking from that mainstream perspective, and if you want to give any merit to their numbers, which I typically don't, they fucked up by going hardcore with identity politics and immigration and things like that. And they couldn't admit it. They couldn't let it go, and they still can't let it go. So, I think it was largely done by design. Now, I will say, for an even deeper dive, I'm going to be sharing my personal perspective on, Trump's cabinet. But if you want the latest word from the Independent Media Alliance, which is, of course, an alliance organized by myself, Ryan Christian, and Whitney Webb, which features a dozen different independent media journalists and podcasters. Our website will be launching very soon, hopefully by the end of this year, before the end of the year, thanks to the folks over on Odyssey. They're really building us a censorship-proof platform, and you're going to see a lot more coming from the IMA. But this panel featured myself, Ryan, Kit Knightley of Off Guardian, Catherine Austin Fitz of the Solari Report, Steve of Slow News Day, Hjorve of Geopolitics and Empire, and again, myself. And we talked all about Trump's cabinet picks and policy proposals. I'm actually going to play you guys a quick clip from this to sort of understand my main perspective on the problems associated with Trump's cabinet picks here. So let's go ahead and just take a quick look at this. This is from the most recent IMA panel, and then we'll continue on looking at how the technocrats are all up in Trump's shit right now.
And for me, the big one is technocracy or big tech. I think that's the key. And I had a chat yesterday with Patrick Wood of Technocracy, and he's going to give a presentation this weekend, he said, but he's talking about techno-populism. And I think that's sort of the cutting edge of all of this. And again, the definition of technopopulism says it's either a populism in favor of technocracy or a populism concerning certain technology, usually information technology or any populist ideology conversed using digital media. It can be employed by single politicians or whole political movements, respectively. And it says neighboring terms used are technocratic populism, technological populism, and cyber populism. And to me, that sounds a lot like the Trump administration with Elon Musk, where they've merged populism with technocracy. And that just seems to be, I think, what they're going to be doing.
I'd like to jump in here real quick if I could. I'm going to have to jump off in a few minutes. But basically, to pick up there on the techno-populism angle, I think that is really important. And besides maybe some potentials like Kit was talking about for Trump to do some anti-establishment things to try to get his street cred back. I think we can already clearly see what Steve was talking about, the numerous people who are associated with Israel, who have, outright supported Israel and Zionism. Trump's already saying he's going to lift any limits on arms deals to Israel. He's already saying, as soon as he gets into office, they're going to start limiting free speech on campuses to go after anti-Semitic propaganda. So I think we're going to see the increase in that. And in terms of the technocracy aspect, Jim O'Neill, who is appointed or at least nominated to HHS Deputy Secretary, who would serve under RFK if they're both chosen, he is a former CEO of Peter Thiel's the Thiel Foundation. So I mean, that to me is, everybody here and hopefully in the audience is aware of Peter Thiel and understands the importance of that. I'm also working on another investigation for TLAV right now, looking deeper into Elon Musk and specifically his role. Why he's so much embracing Donald Trump. And I think there's some really clear, obvious examples. That would be, for one, he stands to benefit immensely financially from all the different military industrial complex contracts that his companies have. And I'm specifically looking at his Star Shield program, which started to be reported on late in 2023. And it has, bits of information have been dripping out this year. But what we've come to realize is that it's a $1.8 billion classified contract. And more and more details are pointing to that the contract's probably with the National Reconnaissance Office, which handles all the satellites and the surveillance around the planet. And using Starlink and in this Star Shield program, Musk, especially now with Trump in office, it can expect to get more financial business, but also to help the military industrial complex, the U.S. military, the U.S. intelligence apparatus, to have the ability, in their own words, to see anyone anywhere on the planet to a degree that they've never had before, where they're basically saying the head of the NRO in a recent discussion about this said there will be nowhere for anybody to hide. Of course, they're saying this is just for bad guys, for terrorists. But I think that's another aspect of creating this technocrat dream of being able to monitor everything on the planet and in order to allocate resources, of course, terrorism, catch bad guys, all that sort of stuff. That to me is another big picture that a lot of the Trump supporters aren't seeing. And I'll just throw this one in real briefly since I can't be on too long today. But Trump also just this week announced Chad Cronister, who's currently a sheriff in Florida. He's supposed to head the DEA. Just one interesting connection here that our fellow IMA member Whitney Webb has written about in her book. The sheriff Chad Cronister, his wife is Nikki, what is the name? DeBartolo, and her father, Edward DeBartolo Sr. He was known for his mafia connections going back to Ohio, where he was in business with Les Wexner, who of course was one of the financiers behind Jeffrey Epstein, and Les Wexner was part of the mega group, which of course goes back to Israel and Mossad connections there. So this sheriff out of Florida, who's being appointed at the head of DEA, his wife and her family have connections to the mafia, and her brother actually used to own the San Francisco 49ers, and he was fined like $1 million and given a felony conviction for some shady business deals he did. Trump actually pardoned him during his first term. So again, you can see that sort of coming full circle. Trump pardons a friend, and then that friend's brother-in-law is appointed to be DEA, head of the DEA. So, I mean, I think we're seeing a lot of just swampy different connections going on that hopefully more and more people will be paying attention to. So that was the clip from the IMA panel. And again, you can find that at theconsciousresistance.com. I just asked on the chat here, and I will ask again here for anybody who's watching elsewhere, how many people are familiar with Starshield? I'd love to see in the comments. I'm going to be talking more about Starshield in just a few moments, which is a program launched related to Starlink, which are probably more familiar with, related to Elon Musk. But if you want to see the full, where that clip just came from, you want to see the full thing, go to theconsciousresistance.com. You can see Trump admin 2024, and stay tuned for more from the Independent Media Alliance. We're going to have a lot more to cover. So let's dive into this. Let's go further into Trump's cabinet. Once again, I like to start with like the mainstream view on things and show you that even from the mainstream, you don't have to be a full-on conspiracy theorist, although they always miss important pieces of the puzzle. You can still look at this from a mainstream perspective and still gain some truth and see that, for one, in this case, Trump is not your friend. The Atlantic calling it out, fill the swamp. Trump's appointees are putting lobbyists and industry leaders into positions of immense government power. And they say this, as the 2016 presidential election drew to an end, Donald Trump began using a new slogan, drain the swamp. It was a neat encapsulation of his critique of his Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton, and of the country's governing establishment of two parties, which he painted as corrupt, cozy, and self-dealing. These days, the catchphrase has begun to vanish from his repertoire. Last month, the Washington Post calculated that Trump had used drain the swamp only 59 times on Truth Social in the past 2 years, fewer times than he wrote about it in all of 2016 in October alone. So in the last 2 years, he's only said drain the swamp 59 times. But going back to October 2016, he was saying it, more than that in just 1 month. And the shift isn't just semantic. Trump's staffing decisions, his transition design, and his own behavior show that he is uninterested in even keeping up his appearances this time. Trump himself will never say it, but the credo of his second term is coming into focus. Fill the swamp. Now, one of the most obvious examples of this is what we've talked about. Again, I didn't do any reporting on this, but I posted it on social media before my break. You probably have heard about it right now and seen this article going around about Susie Wiles, who is Trump's White House chief of staff now. She was a registered lobbyist. She's been a part of Trump's team for a while. She was part of Ballard Partners, which is a lobby. They lobby for a bunch of different corporate clients. And in 2018, Political magazine called the firm's founder, Brian Ballard, of Ballard Partners, where Trump's chief of staff now used to work, the most powerful lobbyist in Trump's Washington. And there's even further, I think it's Susie Wiles. She also worked for the company Mercury that many of you have probably seen about. There's some big pharma connections. So his own literal chief of staff is a lobbyist, basically. But then it goes even further. Pam Bondi, who is Trump's nominee for Attorney General, she also worked for this Ballard Partners lobbying firm, where her clients included the Qatari government, Amazon, and Uber. Trump's pick for transportation secretary, worked as a lobbyist at another firm. And in August, funny enough, when Trump was trying to win votes, he went on Theo Von's podcast, talked to all the cool, hip, young dudes. And he said, you have to stop listening to lobbyists. You know, he likes to say things like that. Instead, you just have to hire them. Don't listen to them. Just hire them. Let them make decisions. Why listen to them when you can just put them in positions of power? And more and more people are noticing this. You got Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who I wrote about before the election, telling you guys about the technocrats who are supporting Donald Trump. Howard Lutnick is, of course, coming from the financial firm Cantor Fitzgerald. Cantor Fitzgerald had offices in the Twin Towers on 9/11. And just, coincidentally at that day, Howard Lutnick didn't go to work because he had to take his son to kindergarten, he says. And then all his employees died and they lost a lot of money. He got even richer. He's also part of the co-opting the hijacking of Bitcoin and mainstreaming it and turning it into just a digital gold. He's now Trump's commerce secretary. You got the freaking former head of World Wrestling Entertainment, WWE, WWF, Linda McMahon. She's supposed to lead the education department. Scott Bessent, who's got a hedge fund mogul. I mean, I could show you guys, but I've already got so many tabs open right now that I don't want to crash my computer. But I have an entire folder. I'm just going to do it. Just called Trump's second term. I don't know if you guys can see these tabs popping up for me. That probably won't work. But I've got just an entire folder called Trump's second term, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's at least 20 or 30 different links showing all the different connections between Trump's picks and Zionism. How many, even people who aren't in a position to have anything to do with Israel, have been out there praising Israel, including Pam Bondi, the Florida AG, gushes over the U.S. Embassy and Jerusalem. Trump himself was saying that as soon as he gets into office, they're going to try to stop this anti-Semitic hate. And Trump's number 2 pick for the HHS, I think I might have mentioned this in that clip from the IMA, the Independent Media Alliance. He was actually part of Peter Thiel's Thiel Foundation. I mean, we just keep going on and on and on, but I just wonder how many people are even going to pay attention anymore, because they're like, yeah, but maybe RFK, he might do something. We'll talk about that in just a moment. And of course, there's a few things like, okay, Doge and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, they're going to save us. Although, again, people still don't recognize that those aren't heroes. Those aren't people that are on your team. These are guys that both Ramaswamy and Elon Musk helped develop the mRNA vaccines that were sure used on a lot of people during COVID, in case you didn't notice. These are not your friends. These are technocrats. So I could keep going on, but even from the mainstream perspective of the Atlantic, they're calling it out. And let me go ahead and pull up the article I was going to talk about with RFK. This is another good one from the Atlantic that offers a perspective. Again, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to see that maybe all is not what people are being sold. So many people are like, okay, I see what you're saying, Derrick. There sure are a lot of Zionists, and there sure are a lot of bad people that Trump's putting in his cabinet, but we at least got RFK Jr. He's going to be nominated for the HHS. Maybe he'll get in there, and maybe he will, maybe he won't. We'll see either way, right? I'm glad fluoride is being discussed. I'm going to have an article talking about that, how fluoride's in the news, but it's being, they're still lying about it. But this article is called RFK Jr. is in the wrong agency. He would be a great agriculture secretary. And I thought this was interesting. Again, this is just a mainstream perspective, but it's basically saying how that based on the things that RFK has said, based on his recent public statements, he appears much more interested in cutting down on America's consumption of seed oils and frozen school lunch pizza than overseeing the than overseeing the HHS department. Now, it would seem counterproductive to think, well, doesn't HHS have a lot to do with these areas that RFK says he's interested in? Well, apparently not, according to this article and some of my own research into what HHS actually does. It says, if in nominating Kennedy to lead the health department, Trump is kneecapping one of the few bipartisan issues he campaigned on his election, to improve diet and overall health of Americans. If Trump truly wanted RFK Jr. to fulfill his pledge to make America healthy again, he should have picked him for a different job than health secretary. He says, since endorsing Trump, Kennedy has pledged that he will get processed food out of lunch immediately, arguing that the government must stop subsidizing the crops that make seed oils, and urged Trump to stop allowing people to buy soda with federal food benefits. Make America Healthy Again, talks about getting rid of pesticides, regenerative agriculture, et cetera. Kennedy won't be able to do any of this as the head of the federal health department. He has already signaled that the EPA, Trump has already signaled that the EPA, which has the power to crack down on pesticides, is off limits to Bobby because he doesn't like oil. So how much power will RFK even have to do anything about what's going on in the EPA remains to be seen. But Kennedy could have been an era-defining leader of the USDA, which regulates school lunches, doles out subsidies for oilseed crops, and sets rules for public assistance programs like SNAP. And it says before being nominated for HHS, RFK even tweeted or posted an Instagram video inside the Department of Agriculture promising that he will enact the Maha agenda when Donald Trump gets me inside the USDA. So it appeared like Bobby RFK Jr. even believed or may have been told he was going to be appointed to the USDA at first. He literally went to the building and said, hey, when I get into the USDA, I'm going to do all this good stuff. And instead, he gets the HHS position. Now, it could be that they worried, I'm just speculating here, that USDA also obviously has to do with agriculture. And maybe they're like, oh, Bobby, if RFK is too far left, what if he tries to do some climate policies relating to, the agricultural industry or something like that? Nevertheless, he's at the HHS now, and they're saying he will have some ability to ban certain food additives. He'll have direct impact on the next round of federal dietary guidelines, which are due in 2025. But HHS has no power to change Americans' food intake, either indirect or slow. To remove a food ingredient as health secretary, he would have to pressure the FDA to issue ingredient bans. And he might be able to do this because Trump appointed Marty McCarry, who's skeptical of vaccines, but also, is not perfect. The point is, it could be quite possibly that RFK was nominated to a position that maybe he's going to get, maybe he won't. But even if he does, he might not even really be able to affect any of the change that people are all putting their hopium in right now. And wouldn't that be interesting? I wouldn't be surprised, because as crazy as that sounds, that's how politics works. And you get screwed, you don't get what you asked for. But let's go now further into the technocracy side of things, which I think is the most important piece of this puzzle. How the technocrats are directly influencing Donald Trump's campaign, and namely, of course, Elon Musk. Elon Musk is of course the big one here that is having an influence. And no, he's not a hero. No, he's not, to all the sycophants on X who can't get his wang out their mouth. Like, this guy is not on your side. This guy's making billions of dollars off military industrial complex, and through the Starshield program, he's helping the U.S. military build the largest satellite surveillance program. Elon Musk joins Trump's call with Ukraine's Zelensky. This was reported right after Trump got elected. Literally a couple days later, Elon Musk joined a Wednesday call between President-elect Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, said 4 people familiar with the matter. Now, it goes on there, says some stuff that's not really important, but this is the one part that I want you guys to understand. Musk, who donated well over $75 million to Trump's campaign, provided logistic support for his voter turnout efforts and extolled the GOP candidate on his social media platform, and has much to gain from his newfound political kinship. His companies, including SpaceX and Tesla, received billions of dollars in government contracts across more than a dozen federal agencies, including the Pentagon, which rely on Musk to launch its military satellites into orbit. Musk's relationships with federal agencies have been contentious in several instances, however, with some of the subject of investigation and review. So it also says here, Ukraine depends heavily on Starlink to provide secure communication among frontline troops to allow constant battlefield monitoring and command centers where internet access may be otherwise spotty. So Elon's already helping the Ukrainian fight by providing Starlink. Tens of thousands of Starlink devices, many spray painted in camouflage colors to avoid Russian detection, are on the front lines. So he's readily involved in the Ukrainian conflict in that way. And there's other ways as well. And they also already kind of touched on the fact that he is, being subsidized by the US government. Let's go on further. Just a little side note here. Palantir, this was announced. The reason I pulled this one up, it's not directly related to Trump's admin, but it happened the days after Trump was elected. Anthropic teams up with Palantir and Amazon Web Services to sell AI to defense customers. Trust me, these names are going to be important if you don't know them yet. Anthropic, remember that? It's going to be important just like Palantir. Anthropic on Thursday said it is teaming up with data analytics firm Palantir to provide U.S. intelligence and defense agencies access to Anthropic's cloud family of cloud, I think is the name of the AI models. The news comes as a growing number of AI vendors look to ink deals with U.S. defense customers for strategic and fiscal reasons. So just another organization working with Palantir of Peter Thiel fame to help the US military. We could go on. Silicon Valley protested Trump in 2016. Now it wants to work with him. And this is something I've been warning about for a while now when I wrote my articles in the last couple of months, pointing out how the technocrats, including those who are involved in trying to mainstream and hijack Bitcoin, have been going all in Donald Trump since they had a private dinner meeting back in April or May in Silicon Valley at David Sacks' house. And David Sacks, formerly of PayPal, part of the PayPal mafia, was recently appointed to AI czar by Donald Trump. It's one big club and you ain't in it. And this article just goes on, just showing how all the technocrats they're slobbing over Trump's knob now, trying to get his support for one reason or another. And it's just the whole technocrat class is backing Trump now. This one shows what might be coming in the near future. Genetic discrimination is coming for us all. Like I kind of mix some of these in here. Hopefully that you'll see how they're all related by the end of this. And this is just talking about how people have been criminalized and discriminated against by their genes. It's already happening. Gattaca is already coming to life. If you don't know the movie Gattaca, you need to know it. Now, the next 3 articles that I'm going to share here are my own articles. Actually, the next 4 articles are my own articles here relating to the Trump administration. Like I said, I've been off social media for a couple of weeks, but I haven't stopped doing my research. I haven't stopped diving into what's actually taking place. And as soon as Trump won office, like I said, with this whole Anthropic and Palantir contract getting signed, as soon as Trump came in office, the ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who are the people who are supposedly going to lead Trump's effort to round up millions of Americans who are staying, in the country illegally, people who came to the U.S. illegally, going to round them up and potentially with the help of the military. As soon as Trump got elected, ICE and other federal agencies immediately started getting new contracts with all kinds of firms who stand to make a lot of money during Trump's presidency. One of them is called the NS Group, which you might have heard about in the past. So this article I wrote for T-Labs called Meet the Spyware Companies Preparing to Unleash Their Technology During Trump's Second Term. A small but growing number of private companies selling digital tools to hack smartphones and messaging apps like WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram are likely to benefit financially from the incoming Trump administration. Like I said, in late September, signed a $2 million one-year contract with Paragon Solutions, which is a company that I hadn't heard anybody else talk about. This article, really, guess what? Paragon's surprise, surprise. The founders of it were part of Unit 8200. If you don't know who Unit 8200 is, go to thepyramidofpower.net, check out season 3 and watch our episode on the intelligence agencies. Paragon claims its tools can help law enforcement and governments remotely crack encrypted messaging apps and platforms. The agreement between Paragon and ICE calls for them to create a, quote, fully configured proprietary solution, including license, hardware, warranty, maintenance, and training. Within weeks of the ICE Paragon contract becoming public, all of a sudden the White House said, whoops, we have to review this to see if it violates the 2023 executive order by Biden. We forgot about it. Last year, we put out an executive order that was restricting these exact type of contracts. Oops, now we're trying to sign one. Let's review it. So that's currently being reviewed. And it's because the Biden administration is at least paying lip service to fighting spyware. Now, for those who don't understand this term spyware, it comes from software, right? So software is a type of program that you can load into your device, your phone, your computer. Spyware is software something that can be loaded onto a device that spies on people, and it can be remotely loaded. So this doesn't mean you have to actually get someone's computer and put a chip in it or put in a USB drive and infect them. You can do this remotely. This is how the government operates and how private companies operate. They have developed spyware and they're selling it to law enforcement and to governments around the world. Now, the U.S. government claims that they care about promoting human rights and things of this sort, but in reality, we know that they can care less. I mean, that's the fact of the matter. We know they care about your privacy, but they don't care about your freedom, any of these things. Ultimately, they are using these types of dangerous programs to invade the privacy their private on All right. Oh, sorry about that. I think I just started ranting so much that my whole computer decided to crash for a second. I apologize about that. We're gonna go ahead and just pick it back up. I don't know exactly when I cut out. I will edit up this video and release the full thing afterwards if you want to get caught up. But what I was talking about is the spyware companies that are preparing to benefit from Donald Trump's incoming presidency, including the NSO Group, including Alexa, including Paragon Solutions, and other groups that do have connections to Israeli intelligence at Unit 8200. And these companies are preparing in many ways. They're preparing for Donald Trump, who is calling for the largest deportation operation of illegal immigrants in the country. Well, how do you think they're going to do that? How do you think they're going to locate all these people? Well, one of the ways they're going to do that is probably through spyware programs like we're seeing here with Alexa, with NSO Group, and with Paragon. So I started digging into Paragon, and it's a shady organization. It's one you should definitely know more about. On October 31st, more than 30 civil society and digital rights organizations and spyware experts signed a letter which calls on the Department of Homeland Security to release the details of a $2 million contract that was recently signed by Paragon and ICE. Because, like I said, ICE is getting everything, getting all their ducks in a row to really come after the illegal immigrants, and they need technology to do it. So this is the thing: is you have the typical NSA surveying, monitoring your phone internet traffic. That's totally different from this. This is spyware that has been loaded onto devices which can remotely hack and crack encrypted devices and access all kinds of things, download all your pictures, everything. So 30 civil society organizations are calling on the DHS to give more details about their contract with Paragon. It says, quote, "We're seriously concerned that this contract may not comply with Executive Order 14093 and may lead to violations of both domestic and international law." They suggest that Paragon's contract is with Homeland Security investigations within ICE, and that it, quote, suggests that HSI is the primary intended user of graphite. Graphite is a Trojan horse software developed by Paragon, which can extract data from encrypted messaging apps, as I said earlier. And the organization's write, publicly available information has not indicated that HSI has a robust oversight to ensure that it does not use spyware in a way which infringes on the rights of the people in America. Even if Homeland Security Investigations uses graphite solely to support investigations into heinous crimes, the agency does not enjoy blanket discretion to deploy spyware. And so, yeah, I mean, have you ever heard of graphite? Have you ever heard of Pentagon? Have you ever heard of Star Shield? These are all important programs. I'm not saying everybody needs to be completely well versed on all these different things, but the point is, there is a lot going on here that most people aren't paying attention to. All people are just saying, like, oh, Trump appointed RFK, or Trump appointed Dr. Oz, or Trump and Elon Musk. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is making billions of dollars off helping the U.S. government build massive military and intelligence and surveillance apparatus. Paragon, though, as I mentioned, is highly connected to Israeli intelligence and to former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was also on Jeffrey Epstein's plane a dozen or so times. And it goes on and on from there. And then what we're really seeing here is that it appears that ICE is really preparing. As we saw here in the 3 months leading to the presidential election, ICE signed $20 million worth of contracts for spyware, surveillance, and forensic tech that will allow them to track down people that Trump has promised to deport. And Forbes magazine reviewed numerous ICE contracts and found that they have purchased technologies that can surveil phone calls, texts, and social media activity, as well as identify individuals through facial recognition. In the last 5 months alone, ICE has agreed to the largest federal purchase orders to date. And it goes on from there. I mean, so basically, like, they're preparing. ICE is preparing. They're preparing to make massive amounts of money. And one other aspect here that I need to point out is, as I was talking about a few moments ago with the lobbying of Donald Trump filling the swamp up again, is what I wrote here. These type of location tracking devices are useful not only to ICE, but to the private prison companies who stand to benefit from an increase in holding facilities for illegal immigrants. The CEO of the GEO Group, one of the biggest private prison contractors, recently estimated that the company could make as much as $400 million annually under Donald Trump by filling beds with individuals who have been accused of illegal immigration. And guess what? Pam Bondi, who is Trump's pick for Attorney General, used to be a lobbyist for the private prison group Geo Group. So she's a lobbyist for them, and then she gets appointed AG in a law enforcement position where she can have a direct role in the amount of people that they go after. And then the CEO of Geo Group immediately says, yeah, we're about to make $400 million a year, guys. Woo, we're about to have some good time under Trump. Some of the other companies that you need to know about: Boldend, based in San Diego, California; Cellebrite, another Israeli firm; Clearview AI, you've probably heard about them; Magnet Forensic, they've got Android and iPhone hacking tools; Penlink is another one. And then I go further into this whole thing. But this is an article I wrote a few weeks ago. If you don't know shit about spyware, I encourage you to learn more about it. Check this article out. Meet the spyware companies preparing to unleash their technology during Donald Trump's second term. Now, this recent article I wrote to kind of pick up and continue this trend of exposing people associated with Donald Trump. This one, you can't hide. Elon Musk and SpaceX are helping the U.S. intelligence build the world's largest spy satellite network. Now, the interesting thing about this, and you know, I'm equal opportunity for everybody. I open to any conspiracy for the most part when there's the right time of day. I have friends who are flat earthers. There's a lot of people like, Derrick, there's no satellites because we're living in a dome and the earth is flat and the Bible's real and all this kind of stuff. So they didn't even bother reading this. And if that's how you feel, that's great. But even if you think that the satellites aren't in actual space, because what this article is actually talking about is low Earth orbit. So that's not talking about out in space. These are low Earth orbit. So even if you think all satellites are just being held on balloons or whatever, this is still important. Surveillance is real, and they have been working on programs like this for a long time. And so I basically just use this recent interaction on Twitter as a jumping off point to discuss Starlink and more specifically Starshield. Ron Paul had tweeted that he was not going to be able to do his show last week because of internet outage in his area. And then Elon Musk said, you should get Starlink. And Ron Paul said, that sounds like a great idea. How much does it cost? And obviously this interaction got seen by a lot of different people. And like I wrote here, Ron Paul obviously knows what Starlink is, and he might even be aware that Starlink has been a vital part of SpaceX, which is the space part of the company, the alleged space rocket company. What they're really doing while they're getting everybody all fascinated, like, oh, we're going to Mars, we're going to space, and they're just sending these rockets up and doing test flights. What they're actually doing is they're sending out satellites for the U.S. military and intelligence to spy on their people. Every time they're doing a rocket launch, you're actually celebrating them pushing out more surveillance equipment into the world. But so Ron Paul might be aware of some of that, but what him and most of the public do not know is that SpaceX is a key partner of the U.S. military and intelligence apparatus and is helping them build a massive surveillance grid. And this is one of the many reasons why Elon Musk is all up on Trump's nuts right now, because he knows that his companies are going to do an amazing job if he gets on board with this. If Elon is his right-hand buddy and he comes along and basically helps him design whatever his second presidency is going to be. I mean, the technocrats are in the White House. Not to say that they wouldn't have been with Kamala Harris, because you had the Bilderberg group in the form of Eric Schmidt and other technocrats funding her. But the point, the technocrats, the Zionist technocrat Bilderbergers are running the show. Not that they weren't before, but just in case you need any more proof of it. So Elon has been involved with SpaceX with this really secretive program known as Starshield. It was first reported, as far as I could find, just last year in Bloomberg. They said that SpaceX had received a contract from Space Force to, quote, provide customized satellite communications for the military under the name Starshield. And Starshield would offer service to the military for 1 year using SpaceX's existing Starlink satellites. Air Force spokeswoman at the time said that the contract, quote, provides for Starshield to end-to-end service via the Starlink constellation and equipment. And this is to say the U.S. military and intelligence will be piggybacking off the Starlink satellites, which are being sold to the average person as a convenient and fast way to access the internet. So they're telling everybody, look, oh my God, Starlink, it's so great. And even the freedom community, man, I've been to a few places, freedom-minded people who are using Starlink. I get it if you're out in the country, if you're out in a remote place, but there are more than one satellite internet companies out there. Starlink isn't the only one, just FYI, if you don't want to support Elon Musk. In a 2002 report, it was reported that SpaceX had contracted with an undisclosed U.S. intelligence customer. This just shows you that going back 20 years, right after 9/11, SpaceX was already working with the U.S. intelligence and military. Elon Musk has been a longtime partner of them. It's nothing new. Musk's Starlink contracted with the U.S. Department of Defense to provide an undisclosed amount to provide Starlink communication to the Ukrainian military. And the official website for Starshield says that the program is aimed at providing satellites to customers for processing encrypted communications, as well as capturing data about the Earth. It also offers satellite buses for the most demanding customer payload missions. And that basically means we can help you launch your secret satellites out into space or low Earth orbit if you want. And it wasn't until just earlier this year, February 2024, when the Wall Street Journal also reported on another contract relating to Starshield. And it says these previously unknown 2021 contract was worth a whopping $1.8 billion, and it was related to the secretive Starshield satellite communication. And at first, we had no idea. They refused to reveal which agency in the U.S. government was Starlink, SpaceX, Starshield contracting with. Well, they didn't say, but then Reuters reported by March that, according to 5 sources with inside knowledge, the contract was between SpaceX and an undisclosed U.S. intelligence agency. And according to them, it was the U.S. National Reconnaissance Office for the $1.8 billion. And they're not the only ones. You got longtime military-industrial complex contractors Northrop Grumman, who's also working on a classified spy satellite system with SpaceX and the military now. And the NRO is an interesting agency because this is the agency that designs, builds, launches, and operates reconnaissance satellites for the U.S. government. It was founded in 1961, but they didn't even reveal that it existed until 1992. So for 30 years, people, once we started going to space, allegedly, people started, to assume that the military was doing different things, but it wasn't actually revealed to the public till 1992. Think about that. And they provide satellite intelligence to the NSA, to the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and to the Defense Intelligence Agency. There's a really interesting history that you can find here. What I do in my article is outline some of the history between SpaceX and NRO, that it does go back quite a few years. And essentially, as I said a few moments ago, every time that they're doing one of these SpaceX launches and people are like, oh, look, cool rocket going up in the sky, they're actually, the payload that they're sending is satellites for the National Reconnaissance Office. So in September, there was a launch on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. In October, there was another one. They got awarded contracts for 9 launches. And so they continue to work with the U.S. military and intelligence firms. And as I wrote here, some supporters of Elon Musk might argue that he is simply being a smart businessman and cashing in on U.S. government money while remaining agnostic about how the technology he supplies is deployed. Not only is such an excuse a cop-out, an attempt at absolving Musk and his cohorts of personal responsibility, it is utterly ignorant to deny the danger in supplying the world's largest military with an even greater ability to spy on the world. And I quote from Christopher Scalise, who's the director of the National Reconnaissance Office, how he himself said that once they have these things done, you won't be able to hide anywhere. He said, he's talking about the satellites. He says, what are they going to be able to do? They are part of the proliferated architecture to go off of it and to get us reasonably high resolution imagery of the Earth at a high rate speed. Now you can't hide because you're constantly being looked at. Oh, that's nice. Makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. He also talked about the fact that since they're getting heaps of data and there's just too much, the humans can't keep up. So now we need to partner with artificial intelligence. And as I speculate here, it's no doubt that Elon Musk will be ready to offer some assistance in the form of the data which has been gleaned from Grok, the AI bot, which is integrated into Twitter, which has gathered billions of data points from the platform's hundreds of millions of users. So all the different people who are giving Elon, data, private data about themselves, or talking to the AI bot, they're making it, it's learning things, let's say, and if the military is looking for an AI bot to help them filter through all their satellite images and try to, sift through that and see what kind of intelligence they get, I'm sure Elon's going to be happy to be involved. I go further in this article looking at who's the man behind Starshield, former head of the Air Force intelligence. He was an Air Force general. You can learn more about him. I go into the history of the NRO. You guys may remember that at one point they launched a satellite that the logo for the satellite was a octopus wrapping its hands around the world with the word "nothing is beyond our reach." That's the sort of agency that Elon Musk is partnering with now to build this massive spy satellite network all around the world. And it is beyond disturbing, my friends. I've spent way too much time on that story, but I do think it's overall important. And this is why my show is going 2 hours, going 2 hours long because there's so much to catch up on after I've been off social media for a little bit. But I think I have made my point and made my case clear as far as the whole Trump administration goes on. And of course, I will continue to report on this as it progresses. We'll see what RFK does in the HHS, if he can be effective and make anything happen. We'll see, where things go and what this really ends up looking like. But I think the point is clear. We should expect to see more of the same. Maybe you're going to get some scraps from the table. Maybe they're going to throw you a few bones here and there. But at the end of the day, the American people are not going to get what they thought they were voting for with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is going to do what the Zionists behind him, like Miriam Adelson, who funded him for $100 million plus, and Peter Thiel, and all the different players that are really running the show. You're going to get more of that, my friends, because government isn't the answer, because voting for politicians isn't the answer, and believing in billionaire technocrats and hoping they're going to save you isn't the answer. In fact, it's quite naive, my friends. I know that's difficult for some of you people, and you like to think that saying these things means that I'm black-pilled, or Whitney Webb and other people are black-pilled. But in reality, when you let go of this infantile need for believing you have to have government running your life and taking care of you, you can actually step into and take the true white pill, or the true awakening, which is recognizing that government isn't the answer. You have to be responsible for your own life. You have to take control of your own life. You need to not be dependent on their systems, and you need to be as free from their systems as quick and as soon as possible. This is what a lot of my work focuses on, particularly my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which you can download for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. All right. I'm going to try to wrap up in the next 10 minutes, but I do got two more important stories that I want to cover, and that is about Joe Biden's legacy, and then we're going to talk about these latest stories about transgender care, and then we're going to talk about a couple of positive stories. So let's see what we can do. Thank you guys for being here for the Conscious Resistance Live, episode 145. If you appreciate my work, visit theconsciousresistance.com/invest, and you can support me and all the things I do. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. The first element of the Biden legacy is relating to trafficking of migrant children. So you've probably heard about this to some extent if you followed independent media, particularly I would say more right-leaning media, because a lot of people ignore these stories. And to be fair, I don't want to say I ignored them. I've talked a lot about child trafficking in different ways, but this hasn't been my sole focus. But I decided it was worth talking about since Biden's on his way out, and there really is a huge problem with trafficking of migrant children. And I don't think Donald Trump is innocent of some of the causes of this. But nevertheless, let's just look at a few of these pieces. This was recently written by myself at The Last American Vagabond, The Biden Administration's Legacy of Migrant Children Trafficking. And I go through here and show how that in November 19th, U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana released a report accusing the Biden administration of failing to secure the southern border, resulting in exploitation and the abuse of migrant children. And in this report, he lays the blame at the feet of the HHS, which is where RFK is supposed to be nominated to, at the HHS's Office of Refugee Resettlement, or the ORR, and the Department of Labor, the DOL. He says that the Biden administration's lax immigration policies led to the current situation where thousands of unaccompanied children have fallen prey to human trafficking and forced labor. He said, quote, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris had the power to prevent the exploitation by children by securing the southern border. Unfortunately, Democrats treated the border crisis as a messaging issue for the presidential campaign. And again, I will say that the unfortunate part about this is that even the people who are maybe doing the good work and raising awareness of this, most of these people are still stuck in the left-right paradigm. So they're still like, Trump's going to save the day, and they're not what I would consider to be fully awake yet, let's say. But still, they're pointing at a real problem. And namely, these are a few of the things that the Biden administration, and really going back to the Obama administration, did that make no sense. And this is what I was saying earlier about how it seems like perfectly engineered for the left-wing Democrat progressives to have policies that are so insane that it makes it very easy for somebody like Trump to swoop in and say, oh my God, this is so insane, we're going to fix it. And people run to that, run over to the other side. But he talks about how they took several steps over the years to change the process by which unaccompanied children are assigned a guardian, what's often known as a sponsor. So typically a sponsor must be a family member or a family friend who has undergone a vetting process, including a background check. However, the Biden administration, they weakened the sponsor vetting process, including by working with a third-party contractor known as the Providencia Group, which has a, quote, abysmal record providing similar services to the Office of Refugee Resettlement in the past. He also accuses the ORR under the Biden administration of refusing to cooperate with congressional investigations into their sponsor vetting process. And in August, there was a report by the Department of Homeland Security's OIG, Office of Inspector General, who blamed ICE for failing to, quote, consistently monitor the location and status of unaccompanied migrant children once they are released from the federal government custody. And they, you guys have probably heard some of these numbers, like 30,000 children missing, hundreds of thousands. Like, I think some of these numbers are probably being thrown around a bit too loose when you actually get into the finer detail. What it really means is that they weren't able to get anybody to answer the phone on a follow-up call, or some of these people didn't show up for a follow-up hearing. So let's say that a kid does come across the border, and like, just imagine it's like a true situation where the parents like, just go on by yourself and we'll pay a mule or somebody to get you across so you can have a better life. They're supposed to find them a sponsor in the form of a family member or somebody that they can vet before they let them go. And then they're supposed to show up for follow-up court hearings, phone calls, and things like that. And when they say they weren't able to follow up with or communicate with 32,000 unaccompanied minors, that doesn't necessarily mean they're all missing, they're all dead, they're all trafficked. It doesn't sound good either way. It doesn't, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I do think if we care about accuracy, that doesn't inherently mean they're all missing or been trafficked. It just means that they haven't been able to confirm whether or not they are still with their sponsors, and yes, whether or not these kids are safe. It's still pretty fucked up. I'm just saying, I do think there's a distinction. And the OIG report says, based on our audit work and according to ICE officials, UCs, unaccompanied children who do not appear for court, are considered at higher risk for trafficking, exploitation, or forced labor. The OIG also notes that the number of unaccounted children may have been much larger, but due to ICE's failure to issue notice to appear in court, notices to all of these children, the chances of contacting and monitoring the children is very limited. Quote, without an ability to monitor the location and status of the UCs, ICE has no assurances that they are safe from trafficking, exploitation, or forced labor. And I go on and further into this article. I encourage you guys to read it because, again, most of the stuff you've probably been hearing has been coming from biased right-wing supporters who are, Trump-supporting people who they have their own bias and their own perspective. I tried to just simply look at the facts, and the facts of the matter is, guys, this does go back to the Obama administration since at least 2012, and this has been building up. The policies have been reported on it. In fact, this has been covered fairly extensively even in the mainstream media. It wasn't just right-wing media who were keeping up with this, going back to the 2012s. And it's just, like I said, it's just a case of them making decisions which do not make any sense unless you want to lose children, unless you want something to happen. That's what's the fucked up part. But the other side, as I end my article here, I write that, is Trump's militarization of the border and military deportation the solution? No, that's the whole problem reaction solution. So the problem's got so bad, now people want a border wall or a virtual border wall, digital border wall, biometric border wall, biometric entry and exit program. It's all problem reaction solution. And so it's an unfortunate situation, just like we were talking about in Syria. It's not an easy situation, it's complex, but you need to watch out for the problem reaction solution. And the reality is, this is something that the crimes are on Biden's hands, or whoever's running Biden's office. He's the puppet, obviously, but his administration is absolutely responsible for this. One other aspect of Biden's legacy, potentially, and I wrote this a couple months ago, but keep your eyes on this in the next 2 weeks or so as Biden leaves office. He might issue an executive order which furthers the push towards digital IDs in the United States. I reported on this in late August. The executive order has actually been talked about for over a year now, and a draft of the executive order was actually seen by this outlet called Notice, which does a pretty good job, and I reported on this at the time. It's about expanding the use of mobile driver's licenses or digital driver's licenses and making them more widespread. So there's a chance that the Biden administration is going to issue this executive order before he leaves, and I don't think Trump will reverse it or anything like that, because as I wrote here in my article headline, whether Trump, Biden, Harris, or Trump, Biden, or Harris, digital IDs are coming to America. They're going to sell them to you in different ways under different, circumstances. But at the end of the day, they're all coming, and you need to be prepared for that. So we'll see if that ends up being a piece of Joe Biden's legacy. We already know that the migrant trafficking and all that entails is definitely a part of it. But we'll see if he ends up pulling the trigger on the whole digital ID thing. Okay, so I am going to wrap up here in the next couple of minutes. I had a story I wanted to cover about transgender science, but I really want to I'm going to save that one for next week because I want to give it the time that it really deserves and not just breeze through it and not cover the finer points. So we'll save that for next week's episode. But right now, we're going to end with our final story, a bit of good news. Who wants some good news? Look, if you were one of the people who were pushing back against the COVID shots in 2020, 2021, 2022, obviously they weren't out till 2021, but still, we knew what was coming. If you were one of the people who were pushing back and you were telling your employee, I'm not going to take them, and you're telling your employer, I'm not going to take the shot, I hope you don't mandate it, but if you do, I'm not coming to work. If you have to fire me, whatever. There were a lot of people who complied, unfortunately. There were many of us who said, you know what, my body, my choice. If I have to lose my job, I'm going to figure out a way to take care of my family. I'm not submitting. And although life was very difficult for some of those people, the people who stuck it out and stuck to their principles, those principles that some of you out there like to make fun of and think that they don't matter, we just need to be pragmatic and win and get things done. But those people who stood by their principles, they're winning now in the long term. And this next set of articles here is a little bit of positive news showing that the people who did not comply and who in fact filed lawsuits, they're starting to win those lawsuits. Now, that doesn't mean all of them. There's still some worrisome stuff happening with the Amish that we'll talk about soon. But let's check out a couple of good headlines. November 8th, Michigan jury awards millions to a woman fired after refusing to get a COVID vaccine. A jury awarded more than $12 million Friday to a woman who lost her job at a Michigan insurance company after declining to get a COVID shot. Much of the award, $10 million, is for punitive damages against the insurance company, according to the verdict firm. Lisa Domsky, who worked at Blue Cross for more than 30 years, said she was a victim of religious discrimination. The company in 2021 did not grant an exemption from its vaccine policy, despite her insistence that it clashed with her Catholic beliefs. Her attorney said she worked 100% remotely as an IT specialist during the pandemic, 75% before COVID hit in 2020. Even without the vaccine, she wasn't a danger to anybody, he said after the trial. Besides the punitive damages, the jury in Detroit federal court awarded her $1.7 million in lost pay and $1 million in non-economic damages. Blue Cross denied any discrimination, and in a court filing earlier in the case, they said that she lacked a sincerely held religious belief. Either way, she won now. $12 million. Think about that. You hold out, you get all kinds of shit talked to you. Your family and friends probably turn their back on you, and then you win $12 million. How much you want to bet those people are now coming back and saying, hey, family, hey, friend member, I didn't, really, you're not that crazy. Now, here's a couple other ones. I know that these are not brand new. Oh, please upgrade your browser. Screw you, we're not going to upgrade my browser. Here's a trade secret. If you need to get around paywalls or blocks, use archive.is, and that'll get it done for you. We'll give that one a moment to load. Why workers fired for refusing COVID vaccines are starting to win in court. Here's another one. I mean, this is just starting to happen all over the place. The one I covered before was in Michigan. Here, let me pull this one up. Reuters is reporting on one happening in San Francisco. So this one says, a San Francisco federal jury last found in favor of 6 public transit workers who were fired for refusing to comply with their employer's COVID vaccine mandates on religious ground. Jurors awarded the Bay Area Rapid Transit ex-employees more than $1 million each for workplace civil rights violations for a total of $7.8 million. Similar cases make their ways through the courts around the country. Plaintiffs' lawyers tell them they see the verdict as a sign of more big payouts to come. So they're talking about this lawsuit's targeting a food conglomerate in Arkansas, airline in Hawaii, hospitals in Oregon, and a host of other cities revolve around similar claims that employers wrongly refused to accommodate workers who asked to be exempted from the COVID vaccine mandates. And now more and more people are winning. One of the first verdicts in June, when a federal jury in Chattanooga awarded a Tennessee woman $687,000, and it goes on from there. I mean, there's just numerous examples that we can find of these cases popping up. And that's a positive thing. So again, for those of you who had your principles, who stood by your principles and didn't give in, great job. I mean, the unfortunate thing, the sad thing about it here is that at the end of the day, you guys know the truth, right? The people, the taxpayers are the ones who are going to pay for some of these. Now, in the case of the first one, it said Blue Shield was going to pay out of pocket for the $12 million, but still, the people are the ones that fund the courts, that fund the judges, that fund all this thing. So even if you opted out and you said no thanks, if you're still paying taxes, they're still taking money for your pockets. But nevertheless, take a moment, celebrate some positive things happening. People who stood up for their principles, they're now being rewarded to the tune of millions of dollars. Very cool for those people. Guys, that is all of the show for today. We've got just a brief segment left here, but I want to remind you guys that I've been broadcasting for 15 years now. I am paid monthly to write articles for The Last American Vagabond, but the vast majority of my support, it comes from you on a monthly basis. If you want to visit theconsciousresistance.com/invest, you can sign up to support me for as little as $3 a month on Buy Me a Coffee. You can sign up on Substack to support monthly or annually. You can send cash and equipment to my P.O. box if you want. You can send cryptocurrency if you're into that as well. Any way you can support to help me continue to do this is always appreciated so that I can continue to broadcast podcasts, documentaries, speak and organize events and do so many other things that I hope you guys will pay attention to and care about. And I really do appreciate your time. Last thing I want to share with you guys real quick. Usually I end the show with a segment called What's Derrick Reading, and I pick up a book off my shelf. But I'm actually going to show you guys a couple other things. Here's 3 books that I just ordered recently that I'm waiting to be delivered to me. The Unholy Trinity, the Vatican, the Nazis, and the Swiss banks. I'm looking forward to reading this one. I know some of that history, but I want to know more of it. Here's another one. It's an old book by Samuel Morse. You may have heard of Samuel Morse because of Morse code. Well, did you know that he was adamantly opposed to the Jesuits and was warning about them in the 1800s? Foreign conspiracy against the liberties of the United States, how the Jesuits used the Vatican, foreign monarchies, the St. Leopold Foundation, and subservient Catholic mobs to secretly infiltrate and control America. That's the full title. I got that one coming on the way. And third one called Investigative Journalism, a Survival Guide, which is just obviously for me as a nerd for investigative journalism, learning from other journalists and from their stories and their experiences. Looking forward to reading all those and sharing them with you in the future. We're going to end tonight with a conscious music video, as we always do. And guys, I recently got to appear at the Long River Sessions in Houston, Texas. The Community Cultivation Network is what they call it. It was a 30-minute session of me performing 4 or 5 songs. Like if you've ever seen National Public Radio, NPR, do Tiny Desk, this is kind of like Tiny Desk, but it's based in Houston with Houston-based artists. So I got to go there and perform, and I did a song. And the one I'm going to play for you tonight is called Till Tomorrow Comes. This is my message for you guys tonight. And this song, it's about, you know, I wrote it about that place I was when I was in the middle of my drug addiction, but also kind of realizing that wasn't where I wanted to be, that there was somewhere else better for me to be, somewhere out there. I could feel it. But at the same time, I wasn't quite ready to take the steps necessary to make it happen, if that makes sense. It's like, I know I should go change my life and really pursue whatever it is I'm meant to do, but I'll just worry about that tomorrow. So that's what this song's about. It's called Till Tomorrow Comes. It's about being stuck in the middle of like the craziness. You know you got something better on the horizon, but maybe you'll worry about that another day. So I appreciate you guys who have been tuned in tonight. My name is Derrick Broze. I'm back at it. I'll be back next week with another live episode of the Conscious Resistance Live. I'll be writing weekly articles for The Last American Vagabond. We're working on the next episode of the Pyramid of Power. I'm also working on the People's Reset and Morelia, Mexico. I invite you to come down in 7 weeks if you want to be around hundreds of other freedom-minded, solutions-focused activists who are focused on growing food, getting off big tech, taking care of their mind, body, and spirit. Then you want to visit thepeoplesreset.org. Come hang out with us. And until next time, guys, enjoy this song. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.
Check 1, 2, 33. You know, I've been reflecting on where I've come from and where I've been, and you know, I really don't feel as lost as I used to, but I know some of you might, so this song goes out to you. Man, I ain't gonna lie, I ain't even slept in a week. I've been too busy counting pills to be counting sheep. See, recently, things have been moving fast for me. I'm swimming deep, no regrets, this ain't blasphemy. I got no time for flakes, cause I'm head and shoulders above the rest of these clowns trying to destroy what I love. Truth is, most days, I can't even feel my own heartbeat. I'm just going through the motions, searching for the real me. Hello? Are you in there? Can you hear me calling for help? You know when you in a crowd, but feel like it's just yourself? That's my daily battle, my power and my curse. But I won't stop fighting till I'm rocking in that hearse. Even on my worst days, I can't help but smile. Yeah, the struggle is real, but the journey's worth every mile. Yo, and that's not to say that I don't have some dark moments. Sometimes I think of it in my life, cause they don't make sense. And I don't know if I'ma make it through the night. And I'm too tired to put up a fight. I got big dreams, not chasing crumbs. That I just wait until tomorrow comes. And I don't know if I'ma make it through the night. And I'm too tired to put up a fight. I got big dreams, not chasing crumbs. That I just wait until tomorrow comes. I'm way too young to feel this loss, false idol. I've been feeling this way too long, suicidal. I can't help but notice this dope clears my mind. Maybe it's the key to the happiness that I can't seem to find. But nah, if I was seeking clarity, I just need to look inside. Find a quiet space, talk to creator, confide. That I feel like I'm losing my grip on this world. I can't tell if I'm supposed to be here with this girl. I mean, it feels good right now, but what about tomorrow? They passing the blunt my way, no time for sorrow. Anyways, what was I saying? By the way, who are you? I really hope I get to ride this high to somewhere new. Elevate myself to heights previously thought impossible. I keep making mistakes, but I'm trying to be responsible. It feels like things are going too fast, I can't keep up. I need a pause, my anxieties are starting to creep up. And I don't know if I'ma make it through the night. And I'm too tired to put up a fight. I got big dreams, not chasing crumbs. That I just wait until tomorrow comes. And I don't know if I'ma make it through the night. And I'm too tired to put up a fight. I got big dreams, not chasing crumbs. And I just wait until tomorrow comes. I've never been good at hiding my state of mind. I've got no poker face, I'm just playing blind. It's hard not to think about everything I've lost, knowing that my pride and my joy, they were the cost. I really should start thinking about my failing health. Maybe stop focusing on trying to build wealth. Are there really better days up on the horizon? It feels so bleak, darker days are where I've been. And I don't know if I'ma make it through the night. And I'm too tired to put up a fight. I got big dreams, not chasing crumbs. But I just wait until tomorrow comes. We gotta stop putting off the things we know we need today.
Since 2012, the Conscious Resistance Network has been an independent media organization focused on empowering individuals through education, philosophy, health, and community organizing. We work to create a world where corporate and state power do not rule over the lives of free human beings. Our motto is leading by example and helping others in their pursuit of freedom. Visit theconsciousresistance.com to find our articles, documentaries, interviews, podcasts, books, and more. Remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free.